Good day, everybody. Wolf Driver coming at you live once again on our semi-weekly. We try to do a weekly vodcast, like a podcast. We didn't, I think last week we were traveling. We weren't able to make it. So we're back again today with a bigger and better show. Before I start, just want to say, you see all the equipment and gear here. So this is what I call Wolf Driver Tech. And this is kind of at the heart, besides the dogs, of the matter here of what I do, because without a lot of this technology, I couldn't do it in the capacity I do what I do. I couldn't wolf drive. I couldn't travel and work the dogs like I do without some of the stuff you see here and much of the technology I use. And with that technology also are lots of people are involved, because my brain isn't big enough to process everything here. But the team I've assembled and people I know, acquaintances, have really helped me, I guess, cultivate this thing and make it what it is today. By the way, feel free to comment, question, shout out, whatever, in the comment section of where you're watching this live stream. Basically, right now we're live, obviously, but I know this will stay on, depending on what social media network, maybe forever. So if you comment, if you're watching this a couple years from now, I'm sure I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, and hopefully it's longer than a couple years. So please feel free to comment, ask me a question, whatever, because I really do try to get to everything, because it's a learning process for all of us. A lot of the equipment and a lot of the things I do are kind of anomalies. Not many people are doing it, at least in the capacity that I am. So it's unusual, and we can all learn from other people's input to me looking at what I do and sometimes reevaluating it and doing it in a different capacity because somebody commented on something or somebody offered their advice or their experience. So it's all, I like to say takes a village. It's a community effort, really. Even though I'm one guy doing this, other people are doing similar, and people have been running dogs, working dogs for many years, long before me, obviously. So there's a lot there. It's just that the technology today offers us a lot of different ways of doing of working dogs, essentially, and having dogs in our lives, especially working breeds that are high energy, like a husky, that are very challenging. So with a lot of the technology and the way the world is today, we're able to do it without being a full-time musher or as knowledgeable or as physical as others may be. So really interesting stuff. And that's why I like to share. And I like to spread the knowledge and, again, absorb the knowledge, absorb what people are giving off, and put out there what I've learned and what I know. So I know a lot of this equipment, you're like, what's he doing with stuffed animal? What's he doing with all this stuff? So, and that's what everybody says when they see me out in living color, out on the trail. They're like, what is this guy doing? Especially, if you've watched me before, I've got huskies all over me. Sometimes they're to the left and to the right, and sometimes they're right out in front like a traditional sled dog team, and sometimes they're on top of me. If I'm laying at home, I'll post some of the videos where they're all over me. And right now, my huskies are Lola, Nikita, Inyo, and Cyan. So they're all females, and I've had all males before, and I've had males and females. Been at this better than 30 years, so I can offer you that perspective of different what it means with different sexes. And personally, believe it or not, I mean, besides the obvious, it's all personality based. And I've had females that are just as, actually more rambunctious than some of the males that I've had, and vice versa there. So I don't necessarily think it's the gender of the dog. It's just the personality a lot of times, which dictates a lot of their behavioral patterns. So I'm going to jump right in. Why I have the stuffed animal? The stuffed animal is really important because it gives me a chance to try a lot of the gear, from harnesses as you see here, a collar as you see, to a lot of this other gear that normally wouldn't go on a dog even. So unless you're talking to Wolf Driver. So a lot of this gear, I can fit it to the dog. Harnesses can be really challenging to put on. So I like to put a harness when I'm evaluating them, put them on the dog so I can see how they fit on the stuffed animal without messing with some of my dogs. I mean, some of my dogs will just do whatever I want them to do, basically. But this lets me really model it in a different format to where I can, lift it and handle it however I need to articulate it, to look at it best and to evaluate it that way. Of course, putting it on the dog is a different story because the dogs move. They're not, they're rigid, the dog, or they can bend, but they can't go past where their joints do. Some of these harnesses you put on them, you need to put their bodies in awkward positions, their extremities. And they even tell you that, but you don't want to put too much pressure there. So we have a comment or a question here I'm going to address. So this is from, try to see the name. Rod, can you move it a little to the right? So this is from Monica, if I'm saying this right, Piercy. I love the videos, Wolf Driver. Thank you for continuing to share them. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the feedback from everybody, negative or positive, so I can better suit this and make sure my messaging's getting out there right. I really appreciate that, Monica, so much. Thanks to everybody for all the support. So the stuffed animal, though it might look awkward, like why don't you have a real husky here, can be a really good way to try some of the new stuff I'm doing. Of course, when you put it on the dog, all bets are off because depending on the dog, anything can happen. So that's going to take me to my first product that I'd like to. I'm not really reviewing these. I'm just showing you how I use standard products, or maybe a little bit of high-techy products with the dogs. This time of year, we're getting into warmer temperatures where a lot of times many people, rightfully so, won't do much with their dogs because it's just too hot, especially a working breed like a husky that is really designed for cold climates. What I do, because I want to enjoy life with the dogs year round. I want them to not just be outside year round, but to really adventure with them. And sometimes adventuring with them in the summer, we're on the East Coast, we're in Maryland, is a little more challenging. So we got a question or a comment here. So this from Haley Stevens. Hey, Haley, how are you? Good morning, everyone. So great to see you virtually here. Thanks so much for dropping by and all your support. I really do appreciate that. Great to see you again. So, but getting back to it, so it's really hard, and what a lot of people will do, a lot of mushers, they won't work the dogs a lot in the summer. Sometimes, depending, when you get towards fall and the temperatures start to break a little bit, maybe put them on an ATV, maybe put them on another wheeled vehicle and get them ready, can start conditioning them. What I do, I adventure year round. Now, of course, there are days when it's just too hot. Where I'm located in Maryland, I can get into the mountains, I can get to the beaches, I can get to a lot of different areas, the valleys. So I can usually, not always, find an area that is will cooperate a little better. So not so much work the dogs, but again, that's the whole design of everything I do. We're not always working the dogs, especially in the warmer months. We're getting them basically some light exercise and some more psychological enrichment. And what I mean by that is psychological is when they're out and they can use their nose, they can pick up on the scents, and they can use some of that hunting instinct, though they're not going to necessarily act on it like they would if they weren't domesticated, if they were in the wild, but so they can actually process some of their instinctual behaviors and use them in a capacity that is manageable for us, but exciting and enriching enough for them. So what I'm saying is we're out in the field and a squirrel comes by. Their nose goes right to the ground. They want to know about that squirrel. They want to process it through their nose, through their scent, and let it tantalize their brain, their mind, basically. So that's psychological enrichment. So when you get them out into more of a wilder environment, that could be in your backyard. But when you get them to more uncharted environments, to trails and nature walks, etc., and we come across, you don't even have to come across a wild animal. They know they were there, where they were, when they were there, etc., all through their noses. And again, it's entertaining their brain and letting them flex and use that instinct they have. So it really is healthy for them. It gets them to essentially air it out. It's satisfying. So that's an important part of it. So they can't be as physical because their way of getting rid of the heat management, the way they emit heat is just not designed to work because they have to pant. They don't sweat really, they sweat lightly through a couple places on their body, but not like a human. So the heat factor is what prevents them from really fully engaging, and that can cause them to overheat, etc. So we want to do this light exercise, but a lot of psychological enrichment. So what I'm getting at is my way of doing this is to find ways to keep the dogs cool in ways they didn't have years ago. And they're not going to be as effective because of this fur level. The fur helps cool them too, or helps regulate their body temperature. You never want to shave a double coated dog. It works negative. It works in reverse, basically. A lot of people say, oh, they got so much hair, I got to shave for the summer. Groomers might even say that. It's never, ever do that unless it's for medicinal purposes. So for my first product, I'm always researching, because when I'm not with the dogs adventuring, and when I'm not the family man with my wife, stepdaughter, extended family, etc., I'm always entertaining my brain by coming up with ideas and ways to keep the dogs as happy, as fit, and as comfortable and loving life as possible. Remember my quote, my biggest thrill is giving my dogs their biggest thrills. So this product, you might know what it is. You might not. You might say, hey, does this go around my head? Does this go around my, like that? No, this actually goes around our necks. So what this is got fans in it. And there are many of these out there. So actually, we got a question or comment here. So this is from Karen Watley DeGraff. Hey, Karen, great to see you. Thanks so much again for all your support. So Karen says, can you touch on grooming? How often brushes are used? Great question. And I will do that. So for grooming, it's so important with the dogs, because especially with a double-coated breed, because they're always shedding. Usually twice a year, they'll blow their undercoat, which is their coat that keeps them warm. And again, this is all about regulating their temperature. So their undercoat, when that blows, if it's not brushed out properly, it tangles with their top coat. And then when you get this tanglement, if it's left to fester, it becomes a breeding ground for bacteria. And then it's harder to remove because it's all tangled up. Kind of like my long hair here. If I don't brush it out constantly throughout the day, if I'm out in the wind, it blows together. And when I go to brush it out, it gets knotty. And sometimes I'll put the brush through it and knots of hair come out. And it can be painful too. So similar to the dog, except for they're shedding their hair. And if it doesn't have a clean path out, it's going to tangle. So it's really good to brush them almost daily. But what I do is I get my dogs groomed monthly. So that's a little bit much for some people. I understand with the cost of it. And it's really hard to do ourselves, especially when you're dealing. I've got not only double coated Huskies, but they're called woolly. So they have long hair. Their woolies are a long coat, double coated dog. Or double-coated animal. I guess other animals can be woolly coats. Huskies, there are Huskies that just get that double coat. It's in their genes. And that's, you would think that even is better in the wild, but it's, from how I understand it, is more of an anomaly, because the double coat long hair actually works against them in some ways, because the long hair, precipitation, ice, so it's raining and then it freezes up. That can happen to them because they're so well insulated. It can freeze on their body and they don't freeze. But when you start getting the buildup of it, it will start to affect how good they can regulate their temperatures. And I've actually had this happen, so I know. and then that becomes a problem. With a regular coat husky, a plush coat they would call it, where it's not a long hair, most people have seen, almost many of the huskies you see out there are plush coat, so they're just not as full. And what happens is that coat is easier to manage the different weather conditions and easier to groom, and less likely. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, because I've had plush coated huskies. They're a lot to maintain too, but just not as maintenance as a woolly coat. But what I like to do is, the monthly groom for me works in the sense that I'll brush them out when we're on a trail a lot of times, because the hair is so much. If I do it around the house, the birds will pick it up and use it, but it's all over the place. When we get out on the trails, I'll take a brush with me and run it through them. And we're out on the trails a lot of times 3 times a week. So, and just gently comb through them. If you wait for it to build up too much, it starts to tangle and it becomes more and more problematic, more and more work. And it can actually be stressful to the dog, because you're starting to pull the live hair with the dead hair, trying to get it out of there. That's why if you wait too long to groom them, grooming's the best way to get rid of this hair, because the blow dryer they use and the shampoo, the getting them wet, all helps encourage that hair to release. So any hair that's getting ready to shed, or other hair that's somewhat tangled up, especially they make detanglers and conditioners for the dogs, that can help that other hair shake loose, so it's easier to get through them. But if you wait too long, then it becomes the groomer wants to shave them because it's too painful for the dog. And that's where you're like, oh no, you don't want to shave the dog. But then again, you don't want to hurt the dog. So it becomes a question there. We've got a question here. So this is from Keith. Hey, Keith, great to see you. Thank you so much for your support. I don't always get to YouTube as much as I'd like to answer your questions directly. I'm trying. I'm working on it. But right here you say you use a high volume air blower that works great for getting the fluff out. That is so true. These blow dryers, when I go in the grooming van, and they have the high velocity blow dryers like he's talking about, and they're blowing the dog dry, or they're blowing the hair's all over the place, because it's encouraging that hair to come out without being as I guess hands-on, without being as evasive as pulling that hair with the brush. There's some really good brushes out there, and it changes by groomer, what they like, Furminator, etc. I've heard great things about Furminators, and I've heard terrible things about them. So what I use is just pretty much, I'll just use just a brush or a rake, but very lightly, because my dogs are groomed so often. I usually don't need to get the hair off of them too much, because believe it or not, once a month, sometimes it's once every 3 weeks, sometimes it's once every 5 weeks, depending on the groomer schedule, but it works out to be about 12 times a year. Really helps maintain a lot of their shedding. And I don't have to be too hands-on myself. But again, in between grooms, sometimes the dog starts, especially Nikita, one of the brown husky that I have. I call her the cocoa colored husky. It's unusual, that color. But once we start, she'll get groomed, and a week later, sometimes she's notorious for this. Her coat will just start getting real patchy, and you can see. And I actually, the first time, I've had a lot of huskies. The first time the first time she shedded her hair, I was concerned, because the way it was shedding, I never saw a dog shed like that. So I actually took her to the veterinarian. I was worried. Mange, God forbid, something going on. They're just like, that's the way she sheds. I was like, that's really crazy. Even the groomers are like, Nikita is just so unusual the way she blows her coat. So, but what happens is she'll get big blotches, which probably because of her fur. She's a woolly, but more between a plush, more like a plush, I guess. A smooth coat is the shorter coat. Plush is kind of in between the long coat and the short coat, or regular coat, and then a woolly is the long coat. But she's kind of in between, so she looked a little blotchy. But in between grooms, sometimes she'll start getting that blotchiness twice a year, and I'll be like, oh, she's getting ready to go. So she's almost imperative that I grab the brush and let some of that hair out. So that's how I do it. I hope that addresses your question, Karen. I think you don't want to, you can't overbrush them. So you want to be careful about that, because the brush can have, depending on their coat also, it can, if you don't do it properly or some dogs are more sensitive, it can create problems on their skin. It can be a little abrasive. So you want to be smart when and how often you do it. Another thing is talk to a groomer. If you have a trusted groomer, someone good, they might recommend a good brush that they use that works on your dog. If it's a regular groomer, they're doing it, etc. I've got a whole box, including the Furminator, of different brushes. So when I get into different coats, every dog I get seems to have a different coat. So I find what dog's coat is comfortable with a different brush, and I use the brush's feedback, see how much hair I get out of it, and pull it out and see how the dog's responding. Because if you use one brush, Nikita might like it. Using that brush on Lola, she might not like it. So I kind of feel them out, talk to the groomer, and because the groomers are doing my dog so often, they really know what they like, how they like it, etc. So hopefully that answers your question. So getting back to what we're doing here. So this is a neck cooler for people that I'm sorry, we got another question here, I believe. So going to address this. And again, from Karen, which is great. Keep the questions coming about any topic, because that's why I'm here. So Karen says, did you have your dogs as pups? What age do you train for harnesses? Great questions, Karen. Thanks so much. So I've had the current dogs, let me see. I don't think any of them I've had as pups. They say puppy age is around 2 on a husky. So a couple of them, Nikita, I got when she was probably a year and a half. So she still had about a half a year of puppy in her. Cyan, about year and a half, same thing. And Inyo was about 2.5 to 3 when I got her. She's the all black husky. And Lola was about 2, so she wasn't a pup, just getting over puppyhood when I got her. So I have had puppies too, from 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever. But as I get older, the puppies are a little more work. So I like to get the dogs that are a little older, that need a home, and that's why the age some of these dogs weren't puppies when I got them. But I started harness training almost right away, just to get them comfortable with it, to feel it. I don't put any real pressure on it until they're of age, or the kind of pressure I put on it isn't going to be problematic for them being a puppy. Now, I will put them on the bike even as puppies with the harness on them to get them used to it. I don't want them pulling. Pulling's a big no-no until their growth plates are met, usually around 2 years old. So what they say is you can actually go to your veterinarian. Always consult with your veterinarian. Don't take my word as the gospel, but I'm just telling you my experiences. When you can go to the veterinarian, it would cost some money to have them x-ray. I don't think it's cost prohibitive. I've never done it before, to see if their growth plates have met. Their growth plates determine if they're done developing certain parts of their body structurally that that you don't want to mess with until their growth plates have met, because you can stunt their growth. You can have other issues with them if their growth plates have not met. Usually with huskies around the 2-year-old mark, you're usually safe. Again, consult with your veterinarian, do x-rays if you wanted to check further into it. But I'll put a harness on them and I'll run them on the bike, beside the bike. Almost everything I do doesn't really require pulling. They can still pull, so we want to be careful of that. But if I can get them into a position working with the dog that they're not pulling, they're just running with the bike, then I can let them do that comfortably. Certainly not for any strenuous kind of work, but enough to get some of that puppy energy out, and enough to get them in a routine, comfortable wearing the harness and running along, learning that the bike won't affect them, it won't hurt them in any way, and getting comfortable with that. So I'll do that. I've done that when they're like, I think even under a year I've done that and had really good success. Of course, I've talked to my veterinarian and had gotten his advice or her advice. I've got a few veterinarians all through my dog experience over the past 30 years. And I followed this particular way to do it, and I've never had an issue. So doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but getting the dogs, they have puppy energy and them playing with each other. That's why it's a lot of times easier to have two dogs than one dog, especially as puppies, because they will play with each other accordingly. Only a dog knows how to play with another dog better than a human. So they'll poop each other out, they'll tire each other out, and puppies, they need a lot of sleep. They'll play really hard, they'll stop, etc. And then that energy is a great way for them to expel it and keep them on the satisfied side. But then adding the bite to it really works well. So usually when I get a puppy, I try to get two. That's the bottom line there. Hope to keep the questions coming. I'm here for that. We can stop and do these Q&As all along the show here. So, but I did want to mention, so putting this on the neck, these are so advanced now. You can go to the dollar store or $5 store, whatever it is, and find neck fans. These are all in the $200 to $300 range, believe it or not. And why you see so many, they're all different, because I test these products, because again, I'm not using them on a human, even though I do use one for me now because I love them so much. I'm using them on a dog. So I usually will test them all on different dogs to find almost anything I do, harnesses, etc., to find what, and just like I was talking about grooming, the different brushes, try them, because every dog's different and they all have different personalities. And of course, their hair is a little different. Their coat, like I'm saying, is different. Everything about them. That's why we love them. They have their own individual personalities. It's amazing. Could be from the same litter, brother and sister, brother and brother, sister and sister, and they feel the brush differently. They might cool a little differently. One likes to do, one likes chicken, one likes beef, etc. So just like a human, we all have individual personalities, no matter how much we're related. So I take that and use that amongst my product evaluation for everything I do for the dogs. Again, from harnesses to getting as outlandish as using these neck coolers. So these neck coolers, they're so advanced. When you go and the less expensive ones aren't as technologically or aren't as capability rich as some of these I'm going to show you today. So these actually have cooling, I'm going to call them cooling plates, some kind of almost air-conditioned refrigerant process where the inside of these get cold. I mean, really cold. I'm going to say, I don't know if it's 50 degrees, 40 degrees, whatever, but pretty darn cold, especially against our skin. Feeling it on I can lift my long hair. I feel it right now. It's not even on. So that is at least the companies that design these, the people that helped put these together, that is what they're selling on the more expensive ones, because these cooling plates touching your skin with a fan, they have fans built into them, like the less expensive models the fan will keep the cooling plates going and also blow a little air on us, but the cooling plates are really where it's at. So if I put this on the dog, just like that, and by the way, these I found, this was my choice for my dogs. So these were pretty much ones that I'm probably going to wind up returning because they, for some reason or another, didn't perform or didn't fit the dog. Again, they're not designed to fit a dog, but didn't fit the dog as well as I'd like. This particular model, because it's got, I'm going to show a little bit, and this is the previous model from this. I bought this before I realized there was a newer model. That's what happens on Amazon. So this is almost like more weight in the back. So this is designed to fit this way. That extra weight helps the dog not shake it off. Now, I'm using these to cool the dogs down after we do a run or an activity in the warmer months. So this will never contact their skin directly because they have fur, but I'm thinking that, and I felt their fur cool down, and they say the neck is a good place to help cool the dog down because it's all the blood flow is going through there. But the plates being cold, touching the fur will hopefully help keep some of that coolness in, and the fan blowing is just going to circulate through their fur. Again, the fur from grooming and keeping the dead fur out of it is helping the dog ventilate and regulate their temperature. So that fan going through it is really, really helpful for the cooling process. We've got a question here. So Keith, hey, I agree with you about not having a husky pulling until second birthday. 2 is better than 1 for many reasons, including tiring out each, and they're happier to be left alone with 2 huskies. So true. So, and when I through my training and through mentoring and everything, I've always found that people will say, I'm going to get a puppy, and I'm like, maybe get 2, and they're like, why? And I'm like, because they talk to each other. Now, it's easier. Some people want to add a second dog later, or a third, or a fourth, whatever. And sometimes it's hard to integrate them into your existing pack. So when you start them young, when they're together, it's usually going to be a better relationship. They're going to bond. Certainly, some people, you can have 1 dog. It's no problem. But with the way I do it, and I've had 1 dog before, with the way I do it, because we're such an active husky household, having multiple dogs makes it easier actually for me, because they're always playing with each other. There's all kinds of dynamics going on in the wolf pack, I call it, in the dog pack. And we do have our 1 Chinese crested, which, even though she socializes with the husky, she's the mama's girl. I call her, because she's by herself. And my wife, my stepdaughter, they like that relationship with just having the 1 dog there. So I understand, it's a personal choice. But what I do, I always find, especially with such a vivacious breed as the husky, having more than 1 can really help spread some of that craziness. But again, depending on when you add them, can be problematic, because huskies can have a lot of traits, they are pack animals. Almost all dogs are pack animals, but they can be stubborn, and sometimes accepting another husky in there can be a little challenging, to say the least. So thanks, Keith. Really appreciate that comment there. Got another one here. So Keith, I have found having a rock floor in my house works great to cool off my woolly husky after a while. Yeah, that's so true. Rocks really can they can take the temperature, I think, and always manage to stay cool if they're not out in the sun. It's pretty when they're outside, a lot of times in the warmer temperatures, and it's always warm for a husky unless you're in the Antarctica, they'll dig to get down further in the ground to a cooler temperature. As you get down, it gets cooler, of course, to the earth that isn't exposed to the sun, etc. So yeah, rocks can be great. That's interesting. You have a rock floor, though. If I read that right, that's pretty cool. So maybe you're saying that tile, because the tile again keeps cooler in the house, like some people have marble, granite, or whatever, versus the carpet, which is going to insulate in some way. So thanks for sharing that, Keith. So these neck cooling fans, again, so I've used them, and what happens is we'll do our adventure, dogs get into their crate, into the van when we're done, because again, we travel, and to put these on, I feel like it helps cool them some. I train the dogs to wear these when I'm at home. When they're close by me, I put them on, and when they're confined, like when they're done eating their dinner and they're chilling in their crates, a lot of times I'll put them on the dog, because I can keep an eye. They're calmer, they've eaten, whatever, they're content, and they're less likely to try to shake it off. This one, because of the weight in the back, really helps them keep it on. It's a little harder. They can shake this thing off. It's never too tight on them, so it's always a comfort level. And keep in mind, I have cameras on all my crates, so whether we're traveling or whether for at home and in the crates, and I can watch how they're corresponding to this. I would never leave them unattended with something like this. It's not that my dogs are a little bit getting old enough that they're mature, that they may not chew everything. They usually won't, but some materials attract them, and I don't want to ruin this. There's pretty much nothing in there they're gonna get in too much trouble with, because they're not going to ingest this for the most part. But that's always a concern too. Whatever new you try on a dog, they can knock it off and chew it. So, and I've had that happen with different collars and different tracking devices. Been there, done that. So this is a neck cooling thing. I'll keep you posted on how we progress with that. I wanted to let you know that this is an interesting one. Looks like a neck cooler. This is actually to go under a human. I think I'm human here sometimes, though I'm a bit husky. under the shirt, and this blows up. So it's designed to cool you while you're wearing your shirt. So pretty cool stuff. So this I've designed to go around their waist, and it can go under or over as my thermometer goes on the floor. It can go on top or underneath of them, blowing air. This is pretty powerful, actually. This on the inside has a cooling gel, which supposedly would cool us against our skin. It's not as cold as the metal, but maybe on our stomachs, we wouldn't want that. I don't know the design process they use. But again, on the dogs, when you're using it on the underside, usually their fur is thinner, so it might be able to come in contact. But the fan is what I'm striving to use to blow on under their underside or on top of them. Their underside is where their internal organs are. So that's an effective way to cool the dog. So I'm hoping the fan can help regulate the temperature down there, or depending on the dog, put it on top, because some of the dogs might feel a little uncomfortable with it down there. Again, it's lightweight. They're not gonna for a 50-pound dog, it's not gonna be a problem. But some dogs are just more sensitive than others. So we could put it on top and try to blow towards their ears and towards the back of their head. This could also, I haven't done this yet, but it will fit around the neck, but I think it's going to flip and flop too much. So I'm probably not going to use it there as well as under and over. But this is really cool. This is an Amazon product made by the same company that makes the neck cooler that I'm using. So again, these aren't total solutions that says you can take your dog out in the heat. These are just to benefit the dog that we're going out still when it's not too hot. Maybe at night when it's a little warm still during the day, but at night when we can get the dogs, and this can provide some relief. But also overcast days that are cool enough to adventure with them, even though, as I talked about, we're not working in the heat. So another thing I'd like to mention, Wolf Driver Tech here, these thermometers. Now, these are similar to thermometers. Maybe they're the same ones. These are made for dogs, though, that they would shoot at your forehead during when we were having the terrible COVID epidemic going on, where when you go to a restaurant, they had to take your temperature with one similar to a infrared thermometer as this, just to check to make sure that you weren't going to spread the COVID, I guess. So these are where you shoot at the dog and you can get a temperature reading. Now, how are you going to do that with a husky? That's going to be pretty hard because they're so hair covered. And I want to do this. I'm not doing this for worried about when they're sick. I'm doing this for when we're working when we're exercising, when we're adventuring in the heat or the warmer months, because I want to try to prevent heat stress before it gets too serious, if it would happen. And I'll say this: I've never had a problem with heat. I've been running dogs for over 30 years, and adventuring 12 months out of the year. Again, I use my brain, and I don't go when it's too hot, and I stick to areas when it's warmer where there's plenty of water access to get the dog in the water, or provide a way of them dipping their paws, like I talk about their pads, and not in the sun, less humidity, mountains usually, etc. We've got another question or comment here. So this is from Joe Bill 0932. Loving your training videos. I would create a series. You should create a series of videos. I would buy them. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your feedback. And some other people said that. So I am working on that as we speak and hope to have that out soon. I'm hoping for now, some of these videos, I know they're not training videos per se, but I'm hoping to share the knowledge through these vodcasts. So I wanted to mention, where would you do this on a husky? Now, they explain to you the companies that make these. Maybe in the ear, sometimes you can get less fur. But I don't want to be too evasive when I'm out there on the trail, because the dog's already panting more because of the warmer temperatures. So what I find, when they lay down, we can get under their pads, because their pads are obviously just skin. So there's no fur to contend with. Sometimes I know some people have longer hair dogs. I try to keep their fur. You don't want their fur impeding with their walking. So hopefully, if they do grow too long, you trim it back there, or have your groomer talk to your vet, etc. But their pads are usually, we can get to their skin portion and take a temperature, and it tells you the readings, what to be concerned about, etc. So the pads, they're sweating there anyway. So that's probably going to be one of the warmest parts of their body, you would think. Got a question here. So this is Keith. It is tile that looks like rocks that acts as a larger heat sink. She will move around the room to find a cooler spot after she warms up a spot. Exactly. And I think I know the tile you're talking about because I used to have that I used to have a pet store. So we put that we called it the reptile cave. And we put that tile rock there. So I know exactly what you're talking about. At least I think I do. But again, the towel, yes, they'll warm the towel up from their body. Keep in mind, they're insulated. So, but they do, obviously, some of that heat will get out of their body and they'll warm it up, move to another spot. Towel is great for radiating the cold, if I'm saying that right. Great. Thanks so much for saying that, getting back to me on that, Keith. So the temperature, and again, I'm not a veterinarian, obviously. I'm not doctor trained, and I'm going to further explore this through talking to my veterinarian because this is one of my latest things I'm doing. I checked the dog's temperature on the pads, and I was right on the average range, which I want it to be, right in the average, the safe zone that these thermometers tell you. So I was going from dog to dog, and that was just recently because I just started using these recently, and they were on asphalt surface. So on the asphalt, it wasn't too hot. Again, I use another thermometer, which I didn't bring, that is a laser thermometer that's for surface temperatures. But checking that temperature on the asphalt, it was still, I think it was about 72 degrees. And then checking the dog's temperature was like 100.4, whatever the normal range is, it was there. And that told me, because when they just even walking on a hard surface, friction occurs. So they're emitting heat from their pads, and as the friction occurs, it can be a double whammy. But it was interesting to me that was what their core temperature should be. So I'm still learning, and that's why I'm talking about it here, because I want to find a good way to determine the dog's how the temperature is truly impacting them. A lot of times you can tell by their tongue as they get hotter, the dog's tongue will drop further and further down. I've had that happen. So you can see how hot, that's almost like their temperature gauge. Of course, you don't want to get too low down. That's why they say tongues are touching the ground. They can get warm, and they can get warm in what temperatures we be cold in, 30 degrees. I mean, depending on how hard they're working. Remember, they're designed to really stay warm against Arctic-like temperatures. So the last thing I wanted to show you, which fell on the floor, is a little temperature sensor. Rod, do you mind grabbing that? It's right on the floor. So I have multiple ways of right to your right, of keeping temperature. Thank you. This is one of my favorite, and this is not on the dog. This is just for the ambient temperature, whether it's in their crate or in the environment, wherever they're at. Even when we're going on the trail, I use these. So they're small, but they're almost scientific. This is a really good company that makes this, called Sensor Push. And these, I believe, are designed a lot of times for labs. They can be in an area that is not what the temperatures are outside. I know, your phone tells you, but that's not at your house, and we're in the woods, so it can be vastly different than what the tower's telling me it is. But I know how the dogs are doing just outside. When I'm on the trail, I know what the exact temperature is where I'm at, and what the humidity level is, sometimes more important, because when you combine the humidity and temperature, you can determine the actual heat factor for what the dog's experiencing, because that humidity affects us, really is going to affect the dog because they're cooling through their mouth, basically. So it's really important. And that breath, when it starts getting heavier through humidity, really, really affects their ability to cool. So that's the Wolf Driver tech I wanted to mention today. Almost all of this stuff, even this high-end neck cooler, is usable with your cell phone, with your smartphone. So that's how I tell the temperature. There's no readout on here. I know through the phone. And you can set alerts on this. So if it gets above 80 degrees, I know. Just, 80 degrees, the dogs can be outside, but what's the humidity level and how long am I going to leave them out there? and of course, they always need a place to cool when you start getting in those warmer summer temperatures. These are not compatible with the smartphone yet. Now, these are just ones I found on Amazon that I couldn't find any real high-end ones. So I always buy multiple products because I want to see which one performs better, which one I think is more accurate, and what is going to work for my application. These, again, are designed for dogs. These aren't. So I'm always seeing what's the best there is. New stuff coming. I've been working on so many bike designs that I want to share with everybody because of the just temperatures and the weather. We've had a lot of rain. I haven't been able to run the dogs on everything so I can show you, but that's coming up. We got a question here. This is from Haley Stevens. Haley, hello again. Awesome tech show today. Love to learn about everything. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know, a lot of people, I was talking to Karen earlier, more interested in some of the basic dog stuff, probably the most important dog stuff. Grooming's really one of them. Food and just normal daily care. I'm getting a little extravagant, for lack of a better description, with some of these other features. But the way we travel and what I do and my research and knowledge, I want to know it all dealing with the dogs. And since they're just heat is their worst enemy, it's their kryptonite, I want to find ways to keep them as active as I can year round. So that's why I do this, but never, ever push it, always on the side of caution. So that's why, knock on wood here, I've never had a heat issue. Not to say, even if you're practicing the safest of measures, you could be at home and, dog goes outside for a second and have a heat issue. So you never know. A lot of hereditary factors, age, just what's going on with the dog that day can be an issue. Just real quick, I'll share. We have the little Chinese crest that I've talked about a few times. If you follow me, Well, she went outside. I'm going to say it was last week or the week before, just where the dogs go. I've got a couple big yards. And she goes outside, comes in. Sometimes they're out there, sometimes they're not. And when she came in, all of a sudden, her whole body was like blown up. She was like swelling, itching at her face, rolling all over the floor. Something obviously was wrong. So we rushed her over to the 24-hour vet. None of the other dogs, now she's hairless pretty much. None of the other dogs had an issue. And either she was bit by a spider, ate a spider. We couldn't see any wound site on her. So we don't think she was bit unless it was a small spider. Not a bee. We couldn't find any injury on her or any what looked like a bite mark or a sting mark. She could have ate a bee. Dogs do that too. Whatever it is, at least it appeared an allergic or some kind of reaction to that, and it just happened instantly. Like I'm talking about, things can happen. So the 24-hour, the emergency vet, even though it was during the day, we took her over there because the regular vet couldn't see her, was able to give some Benadryl, steroids, etc., and she recovered. She was still itching and twitching her ears weird for on and off for a couple days, but the swelling went down, and all the major symptoms that were affecting her went down. So it was fortunately just a relatively quick episode, and she doesn't seem to have any lasting impact from it. But that's what I'm saying with heat is similar. I mean, you can get the dog's doing fine, all of a sudden you take your eye off for a second and something can be terribly wrong, what feels like instantly. So always have that's why a lot of times when I'll adventure in these trails during the warmer months, I try to find the ones that are paralleling waterways like rivers. So if the dog ever really did show some distress signs, to the river right away, get their body wet underneath where I talk about their internal organs, their internal the most important parts of their functioning underneath them, so they can get them wet and start cooling there. Again, I've never had that problem, but I've had dogs that look like they're getting warm, and I'll take them there as a precaution. I would try to dip them in the water anyway along a lot of these trails during the warmer months, but you always want to catch anything before it gets bad. So we got Haley. That's scary. Glad you got to it quick. Yes, exactly. It's just like, and that's why a lot of times some of the dogs, they don't show pain like humans a lot, but when something is like an allergic reaction and they swell up, of course, you want to worry about their airway swelling up and them not being able to get the proper breath, because that can be tragic too. But when you see something, when you can visually see something's wrong, you can address it quicker. And that's why a lot of these 24-hour vets are amazing. I'm going to take a swig of water here. Sorry, getting a little dry. But yeah, always, that's why I always say know your dog, because anything out of the ordinary. And that's why the temperature gauges and everything I'm talking about, the reaction, how they react to different things. If they're good with it and then all of a sudden something doesn't look right, then they don't like this for some reason, this thing. What's going on? And, is it the dog? Is it a health issue, or is it just they don't want it? So that's where we're at with that. When you get to temperature, if the temperature is not in the normal range, what's going on? I better contact the vet. Further analyze it, look at the dog. You can't always tell. They're covered with fur. Because the Chinese crested that I had that allergic reaction from the spider bite, etc. I've talked about, because she is hairless, she's easier to tell, because you could see almost welts down her body. You could see it inflamed. With the bigger dogs, you couldn't necessarily, with the hairier dogs, I should say, you couldn't necessarily see that because of their hair. So that's how we do it here in Wolf Driver Land. We got one more question or comment here. So Cheryl Kovadak, great to see you, Cheryl. Thanks so much for tuning in, as always. Good AM all. Woke up to this and a chuckle. Nice statue. Yes. Yes, I agree. Dogs snap at bees and get stung, but aren't running dogs as yours. Stay more focused. Cheers on water. Carry on. Yes, Cheryl. So, yes, they actually, I had a husky, of course, I had a lot of huskies. I had a dog. They had a dog house outside, and it went in the doghouse, and there was a bee's nest in the doghouse, and it came flying out, and a zillion bees came after it because it took a chunk out of the bee's nest, or it disturbed it in some way. I didn't know that bee's nest was in there. This is many years ago. Luckily, there was no allergic reaction. There wasn't any problems. They do eat bees. That's a fact. I see them all the time outside. The bees are on our deck, on a property, and they just go for them. A lot of times, too, in our area at least, we'll get bees underground. So they make a hive in the ground. And those are ones we want to be careful of. I try to eradicate those instantly, because I don't want the dogs start digging and get stung multiple times, especially their face where their hair is small. That could be problematic, and having that little dog too. So always good to see you, Cheryl. I really appreciate you tuning in and all your support as usual. Yeah, this is funny because everyone says, why do you got a stuffed animal? I love huskies. I got them in all different sizes. This was actually, at the time, almost all this stuff is from Amazon. I'm not promoting them in any way, but you can get almost anything on Amazon. But this was pretty much the largest one I could find, and I can fit my dog's harnesses on here, so I can see how they fit, how they should look when I'm trying a new harness, evaluate it better on a stuffed animal like this, and who better than a husky stuffed animal, right? So I'm Wolf Driver. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. We were on the trail yesterday. That's a whole nother story. That was, if you saw me yesterday, I posted a video from the, let me think of the name here a second, the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail in Pennsylvania near Carlisle. So this is one of them crazy trails why they do what they do, I have no idea. But they take this trail and they split it up into multiple sections that you can't get from one section to another section without traveling for a few miles. And I don't even know how you would do it. So we've got a question here. So this is from Paul's Pack Racing Team. Great to see you, Paul's Pack. Thanks so much for all your support also. So replying to Cheryl Kovadak, yes, the famous flying jalapenos, a.k.a. bees. Exactly. They, dogs just, they get attracted to things that a human wouldn't think of. But, yeah, they'll eat those bees. Maybe if we deep fried them. But going back just real quick, I wanted to end on this note. So this trail was so cut up, and we were floating around all day yesterday, just waiting for a break in the sky because it's been raining all over the East Coast. So to find an area without any rain was really challenging. I thought I did my due diligence, found an area called the Lebanon Valley Rail Trail, which is in Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half from our home base. And we get there and it's raining. We're like, wait a minute. It says it's not raining, but it's raining. It says no rain the rest of the day, but it's raining and it keeps raining. So we waited there a good, we're watching radar. Finally, we found the rain pattern, if you will, the rain clouds, etc., on radar. And we waited there for about 3.5 hours. It kept getting away from us, and then it kept redeveloping. So these rainstorms were just developing at an almost like lake effect rain. It's just been humid, rainy, etc. So it was a no-go. It was just, I'll go in the rain, but this was just a constant rain that the dogs and my team would have been soaked in. So we saw that out west, at least it appeared, was no rain. So we took another hour. We drove out west and we got to the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail, which I've been to about 4 times over the past 15 years. So I'm not that familiar with it. We get to a section and it didn't look familiar at all. I'm like, where are we at? And my wingman, Chris B, is showing me on the map where we're at. Okay. So here's the way to the trail. So we get on the trail, and it was really kind of secluded. It was back in farm fields, and the trail was not very wide, but it was good enough for us to fit through, and the dogs were loving it because they were out of the van, and there were a lot of animal scents because it was pretty secluded, and it was really on the rougher side, which the more extreme, the more the dogs like it. That's the Husky's middle name, Extreme. So we get there, we get about a mile down the path, and it's closed. It's like end of trail. I'm like, end of trail? So I walkie-talkie my wingman. I'm like, hey, dude, what's up with this? And he's looking on the map, so I had to head back. So I turned it all around, the whole rig. I used to drive a tractor trailer, so I got the swing with the long electric dog sled on wheels. Turn the dogs around. Everything's good. We head back to the van, and he's like, there's no access to any other part of the trail. That's it. It's just a 1 mile section, 2 miles round trip of this trail. And it's got the same name, Cumberland Valley Rail Trail, that doesn't connect to any other part of the trail. So we say, okay, well, the rain's gone. It's pretty cool, 63, 64 degrees, humid. But we say, the dogs did so good. They want to run. They want to go. So we load everything back into the van, of course, including the dogs, ride about 5 miles down the road, find Cumberland Valley Rail Trail again. We get on that part of the trail. It looked like it did not go very far. My wingman, and I got to listen to him because he does the research, told me it does go far. So I get on the trail, and my co-pilot that's with me, he didn't have the heart to tell me, but we got to the end of the trail again, a mile down the trail to a different part of the trail. Got a question here. So this is from Paul Pack's racing team. Gren, great to see you. So no, you can't trust those weather apps 100%. I used to go with Bing.com weather app because it was so accurate most of the time. And now I don't because I've upgraded their app to include Copilot things, and it ruined everything. No longer accurate. Yes, it's so true. If you want to get paid for being wrong, go into weather, because the weatherman's the only person I know that can predict the weather and get paid for being wrong, which I'm finding they're wrong most of the time. And I'm saying the weatherman, the weather app, etc. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. That's what I find. It's just, it's pot luck. I try to find an area where I can go to another trail that looks like it has a little bit different of a weather pattern. When you get into the mountains, by the way, there's usually microclimates going on. So it could be 80 at the bottom of the mountain and 65 at the top of the mountain, which makes it good for us. We know usually the higher elevations are cooler and usually less humid is what I find. So we get to the second part of the trail. We do a mile. And again, my co-pilot's flying the drone at this point. And I get there. I'm like, where's the trail go? He's like, I don't want to tell you. It says trail lands. I'm like, no. So again, we had to load the dogs up, load the van up. And I knew there's a section on that trail, like 10 or 15 uninterrupted miles. I'm like, let's go to this part. And for some reason, it just wasn't registering in my co-pilot and my wingman's head yesterday. And it was what it was. He's driving, so I let him do his thing. We all have our specialty. I mean, it's all designed around the dogs. But finally, we get to the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail that has at least a 10-mile continuation, uninterrupted, course, it crosses some roads, but it's not like 5 miles in between the trailheads. So we wound up doing that. We got done around, I'm going to say 9 o'clock at night. We got in yesterday. How many miles was that? I think it was like 14 miles total with everything we did. The dogs were happy as can be. I mean, the only time Huskies are quiet is when they're, at least, the only time you can get them to simmer down is when they're adventuring, when they're working, when they're running, etc. So, and I say that because we stopped to water, and usually they're whining and making noises because they want to go. They don't want to sit around. But we got to a point yesterday with mini horses right at the edge of the trail, and I'm like, oh gosh, they're going to see these mini horses. And it was a mini horse, and it's baby. I guess I'm just going to call it a calf. I forget what they're called. Small horses, baby horses, but it's with his mother, which is the husky size. I mean, the full grown horse, the mini horse, is a little taller than the husky, so the baby was smaller, and dogs got wind of that, and they're like, oh no, and they lit up that area. Every sound in the world you wanted to hear, you heard it. So of course my job is to get them running straight, not to be distracted, because once I can get them straight and get them out of that craze they get into, then they're back to the lecture at hand, back to the job at hand. So it was quite comical, and it was good. And again, psychological enrichment for the dogs. That's how we do it here in Wolf Driver Land. I appreciate all the comments, all the support, everything going on. Tech stuff's really cool. It's really a big part of what I do. I know it's unusual, this stuff, but I posted a video last week, a reel, about cooling beds, and this is one of my best finds of the year. These are actually beds that they run water through a cooler which has ice in it, so the temperatures can be in the 50s, and when the dogs come off the trail and get into the van, they're warm. What a great way of cooling them down. I actually put them in the home kennels too, so when they want to cool there, they can. More about that coming in future vodcasts. One more question here. Haley says, have a wonderful rest of the day. You too, everyone.